This story begins with a girl named Katarina Klaas, who is going to magic school, where she wants to avoid any bad fate. And well, to understand better what she means, let's go back to the past, when Katarina was just an 8-year-old girl. We see that her parents are very rich and spoiled her a lot. One day, Prince Jordo Stewart came to visit her to invite the girl to walk through the palace gardens. Obviously, the girl was delighted with the prince, so she always looks for excuses to be near him. Suddenly, they see a boy who seemed a bit upset. It turns out to be the twin brother of the boy, Alan Stewart. Even though the girl finds him somewhat rude, he doesn't care much and keeps walking. At that moment, she falls trying to catch up to him, hitting her head hard. But thanks to this, she remembers her past life because she was a 17-year-old otaku girl who was late for school because she was playing a dating video game. And because she wasn't careful on the street, she died. Days later, the blonde boy visits her to see how she is because he feels somewhat guilty about her injury. And she tells him she feels better and doesn't mind the scar. But the prince worries that she might not be able to marry because of it. So he asks her to marry him. And as she wasn't paying attention, she ends up accepting, making everyone congratulate her for getting engaged to a prince at 8 years old. Because of all this, she decides to stay in her room resting, when suddenly she remembers that in her past life, the boy looked a lot like the prince from the dating video game Fortune Lovers, and that he was engaged to the villain because of a blow he had as a child, and that Katarina was a peasant girl with powers. At that moment, she realizes she's in the game, but as she doesn't want to rush, she starts to gather information and writes it down in a book. After a while, she has no more doubts. She is the villain of the video games, and her fate was to be exiled or shamed by the prince. Obviously, she wants to avoid that tragic future, so she thinks of improving her fencing in case the blonde wants to attack her, and improving her earth power in case they exile her. The next day, the girl starts fencing lessons, and after finishing, she starts researching how to control her earth power, so she decides to make a vegetable garden to connect with the earth. Suddenly, the prince arrives with the girl's parents, and everyone is surprised, but she quickly explains. And although she was a bit nervous that he would be upset, the blonde took it very well. In fact, at that moment, he formally asked her to marry him, and she accepted again without realizing it. At night, the girl continues thinking about everything that happened, because she does not want to die young again. She wants to live her life without any problems. And well, at that moment, her dad comes with a boy named Keith, who will be her new brother. Later, she reviews the book she wrote with the game information. It turns out that the boy is the illegitimate son of a distant relative, and for that reason, his brothers mistreat him. And as the villain also hit him, he locked himself in his room. And as he grew up, he became a cold-hearted womanizer. But when he met Katarina, he fell in love sincerely. Then the villain intervened, and as the boy has great power, he ended up taking her life or banishing her. For that reason, she decided to be different and treat him like a brother, so he wouldn't have to fall in love with Katarina. The next day, Katarina went with her new brother to show him the garden and the pond for fishing. And she also thinks of climbing a tree to show him the view from above, since in her past life she was very good at climbing. However, she accidentally slipped and fell on the little boy. Although he was not hurt, she was very scared because she thought she had lost her brother. In a scene change, we see the blonde and Katarina at tea time, as he heard about her fall, but he is glad that she is okay. And she also accepted that when her mother found out, she got very upset. Then the boy realizes that his parents are more affectionate than on other days, and the reason is that his mother thought that Keith was an illegitimate son of her husband. For that reason, they almost divorced. But since things have been clarified, they are happier than ever. In the afternoon, Katarina thanks her brother for helping her improve with the sword, and she is also happy because her vegetable garden is getting better, and she hopes that it will help her advance her power. This reminds her that the boy also has earth power, so she asks him to show her what he can do. He hesitates a little in doing it, but in the end, he shows her a small sand doll that moves, making the girl curious to know if she can control a big one. So when she does, she was so impressed that she runs towards him, despite her brother telling her not to. This causes a new accident. When she wakes up, she learns that her brother took the blame for everything that happened, so she clarifies that she was the one responsible and runs to her room to apologize. But upon arrival, she learns the boy took the spare key and locked himself in. At that moment, we see a memory of the boy, as it turns out that his brothers tried to knock down a bird's nest with stones, making him lose control and hurt them. But as the girl is not willing to give up, she asked him to move away from the door, took an axe, and knocked down the door. And well, she was able to apologize to him, making the boy cry from emotion. But the girl was punished. Days passed, and Katerina went to the vegetable garden to see her plants, along with her brother and the blonde. But they were wilting for some reason, so both boys offer their help. At that moment, we realize that the two are somewhat jealous. At night, her father informs her that they have been invited to a tea party, but her mother disagrees because she does not have very good manners. So they ask her to bring her brother to watch her. When she arrives, some girls receive her very kindly. Although they become somewhat serious when the youngest introduces herself. Her name is Mary, and she seemed a bit uncomfortable. However, she does not pay attention to them and enters with the others in the house. Suddenly, many girls approach to greet and introduce themselves, as they all had heard that she is engaged to the prince. And well, after all that, she heads to the dessert tables so as the other girls ignore the food for being busy talking. She thinks about taking everything, but at that moment, her brother arrives to remind her that if she does, her mother gets very upset. So she starts to eat too much so that it does not go to waste, but only makes her want to go to the bathroom. Back home, the girl meets Mary in a beautiful garden, but she still felt a bit uncomfortable, thinking it was because of her mean face. So to ease the tension, she asked to see the gardener who had done a good job with the flowers. But it wasn't him, it was Mary. So she took the chance to talk about her garden, because she wanted advice on how to keep the plants from wilting. However, the girl knew nothing about vegetables, and even less just by hearing about it, so she invited her to her house. The next day, both girls met and decided to find another spot for the plants so they could get more nutrients. And well, after a few weeks, the garden was much better, but the girl still wanted to keep going to her house, so she happily agreed. When the girl left, she was still a bit shy, and as the boy noticed, she told him it might be because she has a mean face. At that moment, her brother mentioned what he heard at the tea party, that the girl's mother was her father's second wife, and that her family wasn't very happy about it, especially her older sisters, who despised her from the moment she was born. After her mother died, she began to feel she didn't belong anywhere, and he took the chance to suggest she should marry Alan, leaving her very surprised, as she didn't remember they had anything like that, where in a good future she just wished the guy luck with Katerina, and in a bad one she would end up married to him. Days later, Prince Alan went to see the girl, thinking she was courting him because every time they met, Mary only talked about the girl. And because of that accusation, she got upset and yelled that anyone would accept going out with someone who has a bit of charm, which he didn't have. Then he took it very personally and challenged her to a duel. But since she's a woman, he let her choose. And since she was very good at climbing trees, she decided that would be the challenge. Although it ended very quickly because the boy had never climbed one, and he asked for a rematch. And so many days passed, and every day Katerina won, until one day he saw his brother, who had gone to visit his fiancée. However, Katerina eased the tension by suggesting a piano tournament. Both are very good, but especially the prince. But when praising him, he thought they were just laughing at him, so he ran away. Katerina was able to find him, and at that moment we find out why he has that attitude, because he's always been compared to his brother. But the girl cheers him up by telling him that the blonde isn't so perfect, so she showed him his weakness, his fear of snakes. But his fiancé didn't find it funny, so he went to complain to his mom. In a scene change, we see the girl with the book of the Emerald Princess, and she wished she had someone to talk about it with, since in her past life she always talked about anime, manga, and video games with her friend, but now not many girls read romance novels. At that moment, her maid informed her that she has an invitation to a tea party. When she arrived, she went straight to the dessert table, but from eating so much she wanted to go to the bathroom. But on the way, she ran into a dog, and she ran away from it and climbed a tree. But then she saw many boys surrounding a girl. They didn't want her there because they thought she was cursed. But since Katerina had a stomachache, she didn't pay attention to them. And because she couldn't hold it anymore, she climbed down the tree very fast, scaring everyone there, and then ran to the bathroom. Later, the girl returned to the dessert table, but was interrupted by the girl from before. Seeing her well, she seemed as beautiful as the woman in the book, the Emerald Princess. And without realizing it, she touched her hair as the princess does with her friend in the book. But the albino quickly understood, and this made Katerina excited because now she has someone to talk about romance novels with. At that moment, the girl introduced herself as Sophia Askar, and since the party was over, the girl invited the albino to her house. The next day, the girl went to visit her, but she wasn't alone. She was accompanied by her older brother Nicole, who to everyone's eyes is a very handsome boy. At that moment, she remembered that he is also a turning point in the game, but it doesn't affect her at all, so she decides not to worry. The day went without problems, and when the albino had to leave, Katerina wanted to touch her hair, So both kids were surprised, because apparently because of her white hair and red eyes, everyone thought she was an unpleasant girl. But the girl cheered her up, saying she is very pretty, and asked her if she wants to be her friend, so she got excited and accepted right away. The following days, they continued to see each other, and even though Mary wasn't very happy with that friendship, she gradually got closer, and now the three are good friends. Sometime later, Katerina went to the albino's house to talk about books, along with her brother, and they were received by her parents, who are very happy about their new friendship. And well, at the end of the day, they all said goodbye. But since the albino forgot to give her a book, she ran to find it. So she tried to make conversation with Nicole to avoid awkward silences. He thanked her for making his sister happy, because she was always sad, because she couldn't have friends. And since they met, his sister is always happy as well as their parents, and so is he. And when he smiled at her, she found him more attractive. This made her remember that in the book, when the man smiles, he charms women and men alike. And when she turned around with her brother, he was looking at him intently. So when the albino came back with the book she wanted to lend, she hurried to leave the place. It's been 7 years, and now the waifu is waiting for her 15th birthday party, where she will see all her friends. And she hopes that when she has to go to the Magic Academy, she won't have to separate from all of them. The first to dance with her is her fiancé, who has now become somewhat seductive. And even though she tells him that if she were to feel something for someone else, she would step aside immediately. But he believes she will leave her doubts when he makes her his, and he gives her a kiss on the neck. This makes her brother jealous, and he wipes the kiss off, and also asks her not to stay alone with the prince. After dancing with all the men at the party, Katerina goes out to get some air, but her friends don't think it's fair that only the boys dance with her, so the girls take turns dancing with her. Days later, her parents say goodbye and wish them luck at the Magic Academy. When Katerina arrives, she tries not to get into trouble, so she wants to be aware of the arrival of Katerina from the game. At the welcoming ceremony of the school, the blonde took the opportunity to invite her to his room to give her some sweets. But when she arrived, her brother also came, because he heard about her invitation. At that moment, they took the opportunity to talk about Katerina from the video game, because the blonde ran into her being a bit lost. So he tried to climb a tree to find his way, but he offered to take her to her room. In the game, when that happens, the prince is enchanted by her, so that made her a bit nervous. So much so that she didn't hear him say that as he's used to Katerina climbing trees. That didn't impress him. Besides, she looked embarrassed. And to the girl, that was something completely normal and is something he really likes about her. The next day, on her way to her first day of classes, Keith mentioned that he met the girl the blonde talked about yesterday, so she got scared. Because in the game, they meet because he tries to seduce her, but the guy has changed a lot, so she's embarrassed by what she says. However, Katira will support him when he's in love. In a scene change, we see Katerina making a garden, because if she is exiled, she plans to become a farmer. When her friends came to invite her to a tea party, they were surprised because they didn't imagine she would make a garden at school. After class, Katerina goes to check the school's leaderboard, where the first is a blonde boy, the second a blonde girl, and the third is Alan. In the game, being below Katerina turns him into her rival, and they end up falling in love. But now he doesn't care, saying it's normal to have weaknesses. He also mentions that a teacher suggested he should give a recital at school. And since the girl looks excited, he agrees. Since it's mandatory for students with the best grades to join the student council, Katerina spends a lot of time in the council room with her friends, including Maria. Occasionally, they have tea together. Katerina remembers that in the game, the blonde girl knew how to make sweets, so she asks her to bring some next time they meet. After class, the waifu was heading to her dorm when she smelled something very tasty, so she decided to see what it was. However, she found the blonde surrounded by girls bothering her, so she intervened to let her be. And since they had thrown away the sweets she had made, Katerina ate them without any problem. At that moment, she realizes that the prince was the one who should defend her, because in the video game, Katerina is one of those who bother Maria, and as the blonde saves her, they start liking each other more and more. Days later, our girl is studying in the council room with the blonde, and when she leaves, she realizes that they hardly talk outside there, and when they cross paths, she doesn't say a word. But the waifu doesn't criticize her because after all, she's always surrounded by nobility, and it must be very difficult for her to have a conversation. She thinks that maybe the other girls are bothering her, so she decides to spend more time with her to protect her, but she's not very sure how to do it, so later she met with her brother, who suggested that to prevent the girls from bothering her again, she should always be with Katerina. Later, the waifu went to look for the blonde, and she realizes that the same girls from before are bothering her. But this time, one of them tries to use her firepower to harm her. But since she is watching everything, she decides to use her power to help her, making the girl fall. At that moment, she remembers that in the game, it is Keith who saves the girl from Katarina, so she realizes she just removed a turning point. In a scene change, we see the four waifus talking and eating the sweets prepared by Maria. Then Mary proposes that on the next day off, the four of them should go out together, but the blonde has to go to her house with her family. On the weekend, Katarina and her brother go to the nearest town, and so she isn't recognized. She disguises herself as a merchant's daughter, as she wants to learn more about gardens, so they go to all the farms. After finishing, they go straight to the academy, but noticing they are near the blonde's town, they divert to say hello. Although they didn't know where she lives, they decided to walk around and ask for her address, and it was very easy because everyone knows the commoner girl who has powers. When they are on their way to the blonde's house, some girls stop them, wanting to know if Maria really is a noble's illegitimate daughter, and if that's why her parents separated. Her brother didn't like anything they said, so he said goodbye to the girls and ran off with his sister, asking her to forget everything those ladies said. When they arrive at Maria's house, they are greeted by her mom, who looked surprised that her daughter had friends. She lets them in, even though the girl wasn't there. She had gone out to buy some things, so she gave them some sweets she had bought earlier. But as Katarina didn't know, she asked if the blonde had made them. Her mother denied it and was surprised. In a scene change, we see a small memory of her mother. It turns out they were a happy family before, and her mother made sweets all the time. But when the blonde manifested her light power, everyone was surprised, and even more because it's unusual for a commoner to have powers, especially such an uncommon one. All this caused them to think her daughter was illegitimate and her husband left. For this reason, she sunk into her torment. However, her daughter just wanted to fit in, so she started making sweets. And although the first ones didn't turn out so well, she improved. But that didn't work, as everyone continued ignoring her. And when her mother arrived, she couldn't say anything to her, nor look her in the eyes. Then Maria stopped making sweets. Well, when her daughter arrived, she was surprised to see her friends at her house. Knowing that Katarina likes her sweets, she went to make cookies. And as a thank you, Katarina asked if she could help with the garden. They accepted. While Keith and Katarina went to the garden, her mother helped her son for the first time in a long time to make the cookies. In the afternoon, everyone says goodbye and thanks for everything, especially the blonde's mother, who hopes they continue being friends with her daughter. All that family scene made them also want to see their family, so they decide to go to their house. But upon arrival, her mother was upset with Katarina for things they had said her daughter had done. And well, she asked them to go inside to talk. Summer vacation starts. Katarina spends time planning strategies in case someone tries to kill her, and cultivating her garden. And well, although her mother notices that she has changed since she hit her head, she has to admit that thanks to that she was able to get closer to her husband, and the servants are happier with her presence. Later, she and her brother go for a walk and stop to rest on the grass. Then Katarina falls asleep. At that moment, Keith remembers that when he was little, he used to have nightmares constantly, but with his sister's help, it hasn't happened again. At that moment, he leans towards her, but before he could do what he wanted, she opened her eyes. The next day, our girl went to the garden as usual, but then the blonde came to invite her to the lake, and she accepted. When they were on their way, the carriage suddenly stopped. This is because Keith found out from Alan that the blonde was inviting his sister to the lake, so he ran to not leave them alone, which annoyed the prince. But he had no choice but to accept. And to top it off, Katarina invites all her friends. When everyone arrives, they want to go on boats, but they argue about who will go with Katarina. Everyone except Alan, as he finds the boat somewhat childish. However, when our girl challenges him to a duel, he does it. Later, everyone sits down to eat some sweets and drink tea. Everyone was having a good time, although Nicole's happiness wasn't noticeable. And well, at that moment, a goose snatches a cookie from Katarina's hand, so she runs after it, making Nicole realize that when the blonde is near her, he smiles genuinely. But he is not the only one, as the prince also noticed that Nicole does the same. In the morning, Katarina goes shopping with the albino girl and her brother because the girls want to buy a new book by the diabolical count. But first, they go through several stores. When they leave the store, the albino girl wants to buy some things before leaving. Although Katarina wants to go with her, she insists on going alone. However, she quietly wishes her brother luck because he takes the chance when they are alone to confess that although he knows they can't be together, he wants to be by her side and moves to kiss her, but she's so shocked that she faints. The day goes on as if nothing happened, and at night everyone goes to a party to watch Alan play the piano. The whole school was there, including the student council president. After Alan plays, Mary approaches to congratulate him and gives him roses. Katarina is also there because she had never heard that melody before, but it is a new one called For You, My Dear. Then he leaves with his admirers. Katarina just hopes the song was dedicated to Mary and not Maria. She notices her friend is a bit nervous because she thought she wasn't interested in him, but realizes that her hostile behavior towards him is her way of expressing herself. Later, a group of girls surrounds the president, but he steps away to go to Katarina. She offers him a drink and then asks if he isn't engaged. But the truth is, he hasn't decided yet because no one attracts him. Then the music starts, and she goes to dance with her fiancé, but he can't stop watching her, making all his fan club members a bit jealous. In a scene change, we see Katarina desperately asking her brother for help with her homework because she hasn't made any progress and they have to return to school the next day. Keith offers to help her with half so they can finish the maps quickly. The guy finishes very quickly, but the girl still has work to do, so she asks her brother to go to sleep and that she would finish. In a scene change, we see a small memory from the girl's past life, as she also used to leave her homework until the last minute because she was playing video games. In the morning, the maid wakes Katarina, and she realizes she hasn't done much of her homework because she fell asleep. Now we see a small memory of Katarina's friend from her past life. Before meeting her, she was a very lonely person, spending her days reading manga, watching anime, or playing dating games. However, one day after school, Katarina fell on top of her because she was climbing a tree. Neither of them was hurt, so they took the opportunity to introduce themselves. From that moment, they were always together. But tragically, her friend died in a car accident. At the end of the funeral, she realizes she has a message from her friend saying she couldn't win the prince, making her wish that if she reincarnates, she wants to be with her friend. The albino girl dreamt all that memory, and upon waking up, she felt the need to see her friend but didn't tell her anything, just said she seemed to have had a sad dream. Katarina thinks she's nervous because exams are approaching, as it's normal to have nightmares when one is nervous. After a few days, everyone goes to do a practical exam in some ruins where a powerful wizard supposedly lived. There are stones with a lot of mana, so the group that brings one back will pass the test. Although the girls think it's as fun as a treasure hunt, the teacher explains that the ruins are like a maze. A long time ago, the wizard placed many traps in case someone tried to steal his treasure. Although there will be teachers and second-year students looking after them, they should not be complacent. Before entering the ruins, Katarina wishes luck to Mary and Alan, who are in another team. The blonde boy asks her not to stray from him once they enter, but her brother, clearly jealous, tells her not to worry, and they start arguing discreetly. Meanwhile, a group of girls are angry at the luck she has to be helped by the princes, since she barely has any magic. As they enter the ruins, the albino is very scared because it looks like a scene from a horror book. Keith sees an opportunity to suggest to his sister that if she is scared, he can hold her hand. But the prince, as her fiancé, also wants to escort her. At that moment, Katarina sees a button on the floor, and curious, she presses it, and the boys end up getting wet. Then, by turning around, she accidentally presses another button on the wall, causing a large rolling rock to appear. Later, the four reach a dead end because there is a wall of ice blocking their path. However, since the prince has fire powers, he's able to melt it, though it forms again, so everyone runs to get through. In a scene change, we see Alan's group with Mary and Maria. Everything was going well until the blonde saw a stone. She called the others to look at it, and without thinking much, the girls ran to grab it because they thought it was a mana stone. However, it was a trap, causing the floor to collapse. When they try to escape, Mary trips, so Alan runs to rescue her. Back with our girls' group, no one knows which way to take. The albino notices an ancient writing on the wall indicating that if they go east, they will be walking in vain, but if they go west, a difficult path awaits. So they all decide to go west because there might be a dead end. But Katarina wants to go east because she says that's where treasures are usually kept. But being outvoted, they go west. They arrive at a flooded area and finally a door. Although Katarina suggests everyone swim there, there's water in the way, so her brother uses his earth power to form a path. As they cross the door, Katarina wants to be useful. She sees a small hole in the floor that they could easily walk around, but she decides to fill it in, causing her to fall into another trap, and many arrows are released. The prince and her brother manage to stop them, but Katarina bumps into a false wall and ends up separated from the group. When the others realize this, they worry a lot. Katarina thinks she can't just do nothing. She has to find a way out. However, she believes she will last longer if she finds something to eat, so she finds some mushrooms of dubious origin but tries to survive by putting them in her bag. Then a shadow appears behind her, but she thinks it's a person. so she goes in that direction. While all this was happening, her friends sought help to find her. Nicole and his sister used their wind power to locate her by her voice. Then Katerina gets excited about finding more mushrooms, allowing them to locate her. Katerina was more worried about not being able to pull the mushrooms out than about finding a way out, so she grabs a stone with a bit of an edge to cut the mushrooms. When she had gathered enough to keep her strong, the floor suddenly collapsed. Quickly, she held on, but when it broke again, the albino arrived just in time to grab her hand. Just as they were about to fall, a whirlwind saved them. It wasn't created by Sophia, but by some person watching them. But at least they were safe. At that moment, all her friends arrived, happy that nothing bad had happened. Then they realized that Katerina had managed to get a mana stone. So she had to admit she hadn't realized it was a mana stone, and that she used it to collect mushrooms in case she couldn't get out soon. Everyone laughed about this, but when the girl offered them some to eat, the smile disappeared from their faces, as those mushrooms didn't look very healthy. However, her friends would eat anything Katerina gave them, even if it might kill them. So she thought about making a mushroom soup. At that moment, Maria noticed the black shadow that was behind Katerina but decided not to say anything. In a scene change, we see Katerina studying for her exams, but she can't concentrate. Thinking she needs a change of environment, she goes to her garden. There, Alan arrives, wondering why she is there instead of studying. But Katerina just gives him a vegetable. From a distance, Mary was watching them, and feeling a bit jealous of seeing the two alone, she ran to interrupt them. But by then, Alan had already left without realizing it. Then she found Katerina, who had stopped working the soil, and asked her friend if they could study together, since she does terribly on her own. Later, the girls went to the library, where the redhead was also there, helping them study and suggesting they go to the East Side Library because there are many study books there. Mary was excited to spend time alone with Katerina, but on the way to the library, all their friends joined them, which made her feel sad. After a while, Katerina got hungry, so Maria went to get cookies and Mary went to bring tea. Later, as Katerina couldn't concentrate, she stood up to stretch when suddenly she saw a book glowing. When she opened it, it released a blinding light, and to top it off, it absorbed them. When all this happened, the girls had already returned and witnessed everything. Upon seeing the book, they realized it is one of the school's 7 mysteries, called Tales in the Name of Desire. It was supposedly created before the school was founded and would only release its captives if someone fulfills their desire. The first wish we see is Jordo's, who looks very happy after having married Katerina, although she doesn't understand how she got there since she was just in the library moments ago. Then they go to their room where the blonde wants to consummate the marriage. But before he could kiss her, Mary abruptly closes the book, as she can't stand what she's seeing. The blonde tries to calm her by saying it must be just an illusion, but she still can't bear it. The second wish is Keith's, who wakes his sister for having fallen asleep while studying. However, the guy has a seductive vibe, and he threatens that if she doesn't start studying, he'll eat a cookie. She asks for it, so her brother tries to feed her with his mouth, but Mary closes the book again. They realize that they must see one of them fulfill their wish, but Mary doesn't want to. Yet if they don't, they'll be trapped forever. The third wish is Sophia's. Katerina and she are in the private library. Katerina doesn't know how they got there, but isn't worried because at least she's in a library. However, the albino takes the opportunity to confess her feelings, but Mary closes the book again. The fourth wish is Nicole's, and it seems Katerina is at a masquerade ball. As she descends the stairs, the guy invites her to dance, but when many girls arrive, he picks her up, jumps off the balcony, and they land in a canoe. When she says she's hungry, he carries her again and starts jumping across buildings. When he moves in to kiss her, Mary closes the book again, this time wanting to burn it, but Maria stops her and asks her to calm down. She gathers her courage and opens the book again, but when she sees Alan playing the piano, she immediately closes it. The girls realize they haven't yet seen Katerina's wish, and now everything depends on her wish to get out. Her wish starts with her walking through a forest, suddenly finding a house made of sweets, so she starts eating and eating. Then something strange happens, as the book seems to be suffering, and for that reason, it spits them all out. No one remembers what happened, so the girls tell them, and well, they realize that Katerina is stronger than the book, and that's why she was conscious inside the book. In a scene change, we see the girl walking barefoot on the grass. Then Alan tries to make her put her shoes back on, but she convinces him to do the same. And since Katerina hasn't climbed a tree in a long time, she took the opportunity and convinced him to do it, giving them both a beautiful view of the sunset. But as the atmosphere was romantic, Alan intended to steal a kiss, but Mary was nearby and went to interrupt him. Days later, we find out that Katerina did pass her school year, so she goes straight to her maid to give her the good news and thank her for everything. Then, the girl goes to give the good news to her friends, while Annie is watching from a distance, as she has realized that Katerina completely ignores her feelings for the blonde and was present when she wanted to break off the engagement, as well as Keith's feelings. Although he tries to hide them, they are becoming more noticeable, and also of all her friends' feelings. Later, we see that the girls will have a sleepover, and Katerina suggests the guys have one too so they can talk about man things, but Keith doesn't want to. However, the others think it's a good idea. At night, Katerina wants to know if any of her friends have a boyfriend, but when her friends say no, the albino asks what they would do if they were dating someone. Katerina would like to cook something to eat with the vegetables from her garden. Maria wants to give him her sweets, and since she's recently learning to cook, she'd like to feed him. Mary says she wants to feed and bathe with that person, which surprised everyone, but they ignore her and she continues saying that she would also like to comb their hair together and borrow each other's dresses. Then Katerina wonders if that is what she wants to do with a man, but she thought it was with people she would like as a friend. And well, the albino's tastes are taken from a romance novel. Then Katerina asks her maid if she's engaged, but she doesn't want to marry, and as it's late, she leaves. Now we see a small memory of Anne. As it turns out, she is the daughter of a baron and a maid. Her mother asked her to be a submissive girl to her father, so they would receive his support. But when she turned 15, there was a tragic accident where because of a fire her mother died and she got a very ugly burn. And as if that weren't enough, her father wanted nothing to do with her because she would have a scar and couldn't marry her off to anyone, so she had to accept working as the servant of Count Klaus's daughter. And although Katerina was initially a spoiled and selfish girl, after the fall she became kinder and happier, no longer seeming like a noble, and for that reason, she could speak her mind and act on her own. In fact, the girl gave her her first birthday present. However, sometime later her father returned, as he supposedly got her a suitor who wanted to marry her despite her scar. But Katerina intervened, as she didn't want to let her go, plus she needed her. And from that moment, she swore to always be by her side. At that moment, we hear a voice advising him to take everyone hostage and flee. But as the redhead doesn't want to take revenge and realizes that someone got into his head to make him do all that, it turns out it was the same man the Marchioness used to give him dark magic. That man manipulated him all this time to take revenge on the woman, but with Katerina's help, he was able to defeat him. Currently, the blonde is very happy to receive an invitation from Katerina to meet in the courtyard. And although he is somewhat nervous because she is not capable of saying things through a letter, he still wanted to give her pruning shears as a gift. When he arrived, he realized that all his friends were there because Katerina had invited everyone to celebrate Harvest Day. She also asked them to wear a work uniform like hers. Everyone agreed to wear them. At that moment, the blonde took the opportunity to give her his gift, but as expected, everyone thought of giving her the same thing. Still, Katerina thanked everyone for their gifts. Days later, a bunch of girls accused Karina of harassing Maria and taking advantage of her position as the daughter of a count and the fiancée of the prince to make those of lower status feel bad. They also said they had concrete evidence of everything. This seemed very familiar to Katerina, as it was a turning point where they accused her, and Maria admitted it. So, she was very scared when her friends arrived. When they showed their evidence, Maria was the first to deny it because her friends think she is too dumb and naive to come up with such an elaborate plan. However, Maria admits that since she arrived, she has been harassed by other girls, and she remembers their faces well. Just when she was about to say who they were, they ran away. At that moment, Maria noticed a black shadow was right behind those girls, and again she said nothing. Later, everyone went to lunch, and while they talked about who might be behind those supposed concrete proofs, as they don't believe those girls could have written something so specific, Katerina was extremely happy to have avoided another turning point. After eating, everyone walked and talked together, but then Maria saw a black shadow in the courtyard, so she decided to go alone, although Katerina offered to accompany her. But that decision would not be good because after that, they didn't hear from her again. 2 days passed without knowing where she was, and Katerina thinks she should have accompanied her. But she remembers that not only she is worried, but also the redhead and the others. So she tries to search for her throughout the school but finds nothing. The next night, the blonde went to see Katerina because he realized that the girls who delivered the list of accusations don't remember who gave it to them, as they wouldn't have done something like that before. Then the prince believes they were enchanted by a dark magic wizard because such magic has the power to manipulate emotions and erase memories. He also asks her to be careful because it's most likely that person is after her. But the girl doesn't understand why they would take Maria if they are after her. The prince explains that since Maria has the power of light, she can identify his power, and that must be why they took her. However, she doesn't believe someone can be born with dark magic, which is indeed true. No one is born with that power, but it is acquired by exchanging a person's life in a ritual. That same night, she had a terrible nightmare, dreaming that all her friends died, and when she woke up, she assumed it was only because of what she talked with the blonde before sleeping, since in the game, the only one in danger is Katarina. The next morning, she was so weak from not sleeping that she fainted in front of her friends, so they decided to take her to the infirmary. When she woke up, the girl thanked the nurse and went straight to class. However, on the way, she sat down in the same place where she first met the blonde, and at that moment, the redhead, Sirius, who wants to accompany her to class, was there. At that moment, she remembered her friend from her other life, who warned her that there is a hidden villain who possesses dark magic, and if she doesn't make him fall in love, he would eliminate all the blonde's friends. She also told her that this character has red hair and gray eyes, just like the guy who is right in front of her, and she doesn't understand how she didn't remember that horrible ending. At that moment, Katarina slips away and asks him if he has dark magic and if he was responsible for her friend's disappearance. And at first, he denies it. But when Katarina tells him that he is a very kind person, he reveals that he has despised her for a long time and that he only pretends to be like that so that idiots like her trust him. He confessed that he did make Maria disappear because she noticed the magic he possesses. And although he tried to erase her memory, it turns out she is immune. So he had to knock her out with a suspicious scent. Despite telling her all this and wanting to make Katarina disappear, she realizes that he looks like he is suffering and wants to cry. So she asks if he is okay, but that only makes him angrier. So he covers her with a black shadow and asks her to sleep until her life runs out, while he cries, although he doesn't understand why. When they arrived, all her friends felt the need to be with her, and when they got there, only Anne and the blonde were truly by her side, so they let her know they would stay until the girl woke up, and the albino girl begged the other girl to help her come back, so she asked her to try to make everyone call her. In a scene change, we see Katarina running through the school halls to meet her friend Achan, who asks if she's having fun at school, since she herself is enjoying it. Suddenly, for a second, she seems to see the albino girl, who reminds her that she no longer belongs to that world and that her friends are worried about her. She asks her to pay attention so she can hear how everyone is calling her. When Katarina finally hears, she reacts, remembering that although her family is very noisy, they are very loving. She has a best friend who is an otaku and likes dating games, but she has to return to the people who need her. Then everything began to crumble, so she takes the opportunity to ask where Maria is, since it turns out she is still at the academy, hidden in a room in the warehouse. She also tells her that she trusts she can save the redhead, just as she saved everyone else. At that moment, Katarina takes the opportunity to thank her friend for everything and says goodbye to her. Although her friend will still be close in her world as Sophia. Everyone is happy because the girl was able to wake up, but Katarina doesn't want to waste time. So she tells them about the secret room in the warehouse, saying she saw it in a dream. She also takes the opportunity to tell them everything about the redhead and the sleeping pill, but the others find it hard to believe. However, she encourages them by telling them he will be there and that Maria is fine, which made Alan ask if she had seen it in a dream, but she feels it's a strong premonition. When they get to the warehouse, they quickly find Maria, who was chained to a bed, but otherwise unharmed. At that moment, Katarina apologizes for taking so long to find her, and the blonde also apologizes for causing so much trouble. It turns out the redhead is there, just hidden. At that moment, a voice reminds him of the revenge his mother asked for before she died. And just then, all our heroes arrive, and he is impressed to see Katarina awake. At that moment, Katarina realizes that if he really wanted to harm her, he would have done so instead of putting her to sleep. She also remembered that he was crying as if something was happening to him, so she wanted to have the opportunity to talk to him to find out what was going on. Then we see a memory of the redhead, whose real name is not Sirius. 8 years ago, his life was very happy with his mother, but one tragic day, the Marchioness kidnapped them both. When the boy woke up, he was tied up and his mother was going to be used as a sacrifice. We learn that the boy's mother was a lover of the Marquise, and for that reason, the woman hated her. Since her son Sirius was very ill, she decided to use dark magic to transfer the memories to the redhead's mind, making a man carry that power. But after fulfilling the objective, he was to be killed. When his mother was sacrificed, her last words were for him to avenge her. And that's why he posed as Sirius and pretended to be a boy, hoping to someday become the new Marquise. Sirius also explains that Sirius died at that moment and everything the woman did was in vain, as she did receive the memories of her son, but it was only as information because it didn't really alter his feelings. Then Katarina, after learning the whole truth, feels sad and for that reason, the redhead advises her not to try to save him. But she doesn't want to help him because, after all, she is the villain and the rival of Katarina. And as she is not a heroine, it would be strange for her to save him. But she can accompany him in his suffering and listen to him until he feels better. Those words reminded him of his mother, and he was surprised when she called him Raphael. At that moment, he remembered that his mother's real last words were that she wanted him to live, be happy, and that she loves him. Later, Raphael went directly to the authorities to confess everything the woman did, and he left the school to fulfill his mother's wish. Days passed, and the graduation ceremony for the second year arrived, which was supposed to mark Katarina's destiny. And for that reason, she had everything she would need if she were exiled. At the party, many girls gave flowers to Nicole as a graduation gift, but Katarina was more original, so she gave him a bouquet of vegetables, making Alan laugh a lot. But Nicole thanked her and assured her he would eat everything. Later, the blonde and his brother were playing, while everyone listened to them. At that moment, Katarina remembered that there is an ending where Maria chooses all the boys, and surely there she would have a different ending. But the blonde hasn't moved. In fact, Katarina is so nervous that she can't take it anymore and goes to ask her directly if there is someone she likes. And the blonde admits that she cares a lot for our Katarina, that she has no interest in a particular boy, and then asks if she can always be with her. The girls hearing this also want the same, as do the boys, so the ending would be one of friendship, and she was glad to have avoided tragic endings. At the end of the party, everyone gathers in the presidential hall to spend some time together before their departure, and Maria brought a new recipe for sweets that she prepared with her mom, and Mary brought the tea. But when tasting it, she realized it was the same that the redhead prepares. When she turned around, she saw the boy entering. He couldn't graduate but now works for the Magic Council on campus. At that moment, he knelt down and apologized to the girl for what he did, asking if he could always stay by her side, which she happily accepts, although it didn't need to be so formal. Although she didn't realize, her friends did, because he was technically declaring his feelings. Finally, summer arrived and everyone had to return to their homes. So before leaving, they say goodbye. But Katarina isn't sad. She's proud to have friends like them. We see Katarina Klotz waking up very happy because she managed to avoid all the bad endings. This is why she goes out feeling calm without having to worry about anything, as she had spent a long time fighting against turning points. Thanks to a bump on the head at the age of 8, she discovered the dating game world of Fortune Lover. Thus, the villain who harassed Katarina, the protagonist Maria, because if she managed to win over her love interest, Katarina would end up exiled or even worse, dead. Because of this, the waifu decided to improve her magic, learn to farm, and even learn to defend herself with a sword. All this tragedy was also the fault of her fiancé, Prince Jordo. But to prevent bad things from happening, she tried many times to break off the engagement, but he always refused. Another of the suitors involved was her adoptive brother Keith, who had a difficult childhood. However, thanks to Katarina, he stopped being the womanizer he was in the game and never fell in love with Maria. The other guy, Alan, also stopped being a selfish fool, overcame his self-esteem problems, and improved his relationship with his brother. On the other hand, his fiancée Mary also did not become Maria's rival as in the game, all thanks to Katarina. The fourth suitor, Nicole, the Prime Minister's son, supposedly never met Katarina in the game, but by sharing a taste for romantic novels, he befriended her sister, Sophia. She was Maria's friend, the waifu everyone thought would conquer all the boys, but it ended up being her who did it thanks to a secret route she took in the game. And that's where Raphael, the suitor from that route who was controlled by dark magic, comes in. But Katarina managed to save him and finished the game with a happy ending. Back to Katarina in the present, we see her talking to the blonde about the school festival, and thanks to that, she came up with the idea to sell her vegetables there. But since they didn't let her, Maria told her they could make homemade sweets with them, and the blonde liked that idea better. Then, Sophia and Mary arrive and invite her to participate in a play they wanted to do, but the waifu tells them she can only help behind the scenes. When the festival day arrives, we see her very happy thinking about all the things she would eat. But when she sees that all the booths were reserved for nobles, she gets a bit discouraged. But after trying a sweet, she cheers up again and looks to share her treats with her brother and Mary, but inadvertently unleashes her jealousy, as she mentions that sometimes she feeds her little brother by mouth, and Katerina misunderstands everything, thinking the two were in love. On the other hand, we see that Nicole and Sophia ask Katerina to help them rehearse for the play, although the albino only wanted to do it so the guy would flirt with her. And when Nicole tells her he loves her, the waifu gets very nervous and forgets all her lines. After that, Katerina goes to the booth she set up with Maria, where she finds Raphael now working for the magic department to make up for all the harm he caused. He asks Maria if she was planning to join after graduation to stay close to Katerina, but after her graduation, Katerina will have to marry the blonde, something that would excite everyone by becoming a queen. Well, everyone, except her. That's why Raphael tells her to join the magic department to buy some time and not get married immediately. She wouldn't have trouble applying because one of her superiors was very interested in her, and the blonde also wants to join. Later, Katerina meets with the blonde and his brother, where both argue over her because of some nonsense. But just before they continue, her brothers Ian and Jeffrey arrive with their fiancées Selena and Susanna. They were there for official business, however. The waifu doesn't have time to talk to them because someone arrives to report that there are problems. And then we see her acting with Maria in a strange way, without knowing what was happening. Turns out, everything was part of the play written by Sophia, and she was only acting. Even though she said she didn't want to participate, she had no choice since the girl who would play the role hurt her ankle and couldn't do it. Plus, she had already rehearsed with them and knew the lines. No matter how much she tried to refuse, and sought help from the blonde, he didn't catch the hints and ended up participating in the play. In this way, they begin to practice, and as she found it difficult to memorize her other lines, she has to make notes to remember them. And it turns out, this play was practically the same as Cinderella, but in this version, there was no magic, nor was there a glass slipper, and the albino cast Maria as the protagonist, who would be the mistreated servant by her evil stepsister and stepmother, and these would be played by Mary and Katerina. Although the personality of the protagonist of the play was actually inspired by Katerina, which is quite ironic. But well, while she was organizing her lines, Maria comes to thank her for lending her leather boots and always supporting her with everything. Thus, the day of the play arrives, and we see Katerina's parents seated to watch the act, but they expected her not to act, because with how forgetful she was, she would surely ruin everything. However, the blonde and his brother motivate her with some words and cookies before starting the play. And well, when the play begins, exactly what her parents feared happens. Everything was going well until the waifu forgot her lines at one of the tables, and as she tried to grab them while dancing with Mary, she ended up pushing them even further away, which made her start improvising while also following the directions of the blonde and Mary in the middle of the play. Then, the waifu meets with her council of personalities to decide what to do and begins to act like the villain she had rehearsed, recalling a bit of her past. However, the blonde noticed she was improvising and played along, charming the audience and all her friends. Thanks to this, Sophia was so inspired that she decided to modify the original script, introducing a new masked character who kidnaps Katerina in the middle of the play, giving her more prominence. It was then that all the boys went crazy wanting Sophia to give them the role, to be close to Katerina, but she said no to all of them, intending to give the role to Nicole, who ends up accepting. Thus, the curtain rises, and they continue with the second part of the play, where we see everyone dancing, especially the prince with Maria. He was enchanted by her, but she tells him she could only be a princess for that night. And just at that moment, the masked man appears to interrupt the ceremony, kidnapping Katerina. Being very close to her, the blonde becomes jealous, so they begin to fight seriously, forcing Keith to intervene under the pretext of preventing them from ruining everything, as one of the blonde's attacks ends up removing Nicole's mask. Fortunately, the audience enjoyed the show and did not notice anything. And once again, the waifu saves everything by saying that she and the masked man are allies, and they planned everything to win the prince's heart, giving the spotlight back to Maria. In the end, the blonde ends up with the princess and the masked man with the villain, leaving a happy ending for everyone in the play. And at the same time, Katerina feels more relaxed, seeing that everything ended and that no one was hurt because of her. Later, the waifu prepares to go to a ball for the festival's closing, and one of the maids takes her along to the middle of the forest, and halfway, someone grabs her from behind and puts her to sleep to kidnap her. The next morning, we see how the blonde receives a letter about Katerina, and then we see that she wakes up in another house, where a maid named Lana greets her, apologizing along with Selena for having kidnapped her, and clarifying that they did not do it to ask for any type of ransom for her, as being the daughter of a duke is the first thing that comes to mind. But before she can tell her the real reason for all this madness, the butler Rufus looks her in the eyes to enchant her and orders her to leave, leaving Katerina alone. and despite being kidnapped, she seemed to be having a good time, as she could eat, read, and do whatever she pleased while there. Meanwhile, we see that the letter the blonde received said that his fiancée had been kidnapped, and if he wanted to get her back, all he had to do was renounce the throne. So the man, not knowing what to do or who to turn to, talks with his brother Jeffrey and tells him everything, also asking him to use his contacts to look for Katerina, and if he learns anything, to inform him immediately. Back with Katerina, we see that thanks to her personality, she makes Lana laugh, and while they dine, Selena thinks the opposite, as she notices that Katerina was somewhat worried, making Katerina feel bad enough to think about apologizing to her. But before she could say anything, the butler hypnotizes her again, and that's when Katerina realizes that something was wrong, and at the same time wonders how the others are doing. In a scene change, we see a small memory between Alan and Mary, where both confess that despite being engaged, they had feelings for someone else, but unfortunately, they were not reciprocated. This is why the man tells her he feels bad for doing something like that, and if she wishes, they can break off the engagement. However, Mary says no, because she is also in love with someone, and until that person notices her presence, it is better to remain engaged. But what they didn't know was that both were talking about Katerina. Returning to the present, we see them join forces to rescue her. On the other hand, Selena wakes up in the middle of the night and goes to Katerina's room to tell her that she was the one who planned the entire kidnapping, with the goal of making the blonde give up the throne. This is because several nobles at the castle support him, but if he resigns, it clears the way for Ian to compete against his other brother for the position. On the other hand, we see the blonde meeting with the rest of the group, where the man says that if the only way to save his fiancée is by leaving the throne, he wouldn't mind losing it. However, it would take some time. This is why his friends suggest it's better to look for their friend. Then, Maria mentions that there might be dark magic involved and that she could detect it with her light magic. At the same time, Mary plans to interrogate the suspects but is stopped by Raphael, who assumes she was safe. Returning to Katerina, we see that she continues talking with Selena, who confesses that she is envious of her and also of the other waifus, as in comparison to them, she has nothing. That is why she wants to help Ian, and after everything is over, she will take the blame and turn herself in. Here we also go back a bit to the past and see that despite all the bad things she had, he accepted her, and little by little fell in love with him. But due to his issues with complexity, he came to believe that his fiancée should be someone else. Then, Katerina tells her that she really was a good person, even willing to commit a crime for her beloved, and seeing that she felt very lonely, she asks to be her friend. Thanks to those moving words, the waifu starts to cry and decides to end the kidnapping. But just when she leaves the room, Rufus appears to hypnotize her again and confesses to Katerina that his plan was for her to take the blame for the kidnapping, and after that, he would make her disappear along with Prince Ian, and he wanted to do the same with her and the blonde. With that revelation, Katerina assumes that the man uses black magic, and after thinking so much, she barely manages to sleep at all that night. The next morning, the man is surprised to see her so calm after what happened. There, the waifu asks him if he is a dark wizard, and he says yes. And not only that, he also tells her the reason why he was doing all this. It turns out that his master wants Prince Jeffrey to be the king, and for that reason, he wanted to eliminate the competition. After leaving the waifu quite frightened, Rufus leaves breakfast in her room and also a bell so she can call him when she needs something. Despite being in that situation, the waifu continues eating like crazy, finishing all the food in less than 5 minutes, so she calls him to ask for more, and also some desserts. Seeing how Katerina really was, the man stops acting and decides to show his true personality. So she guesses that he is a normal man from the city, and almost hits the nail on the head, because he was actually a commoner born in the suburbs, and was captured and sold as a slave when he was a child, so he was very lucky to have that life. With that said, Katerina was delighted, or rather surprised, because with everything the man had been through, he was able to overcome it. And not only that, he also learned to educate himself and posed as a butler of the upper class. Seeing the waifu looking at him with such admiration, Rufus couldn't hold back his laughter due to the unusualness of the moment. And thanks to that, he was in a good mood and continued talking to her throughout the afternoon. In the midst of all that conversation, Katerina asked him how he came to possess his dark magic, and he told her that his master had put him to sleep, and when he woke up, he already had it. Then the waifu told him that his eyes were very blue, and that he was also very handsome. So the man approached her, touched her cheek, and tried to kiss her. But just before doing so, Katarina's stomach ruined the atmosphere and she went to prepare something for him to eat. There we see a bit of his past. As he mentioned earlier, he came from the lower districts and had to steal to eat, until one day he met a noble who was enchanted by him. This noble taught him to read, write, and told him stories about the outside world, and he called him Sora. But as time went by, his master fell ill, and the only way to cure him was with very expensive medicine. Because of that, he tried to steal it, but ended up being captured, and his master unfortunately died. After all, this man was not a bad person. Returning to the present, we see how Rufus remembers all this thanks to Katarina, as she was the second noble to treat him well, after his master. Later, they both have dinner together, and there he tells her stories about the places he visited. So Katarina asks him to travel together one day, but the man tells her that they are from different worlds. But she doesn't think so, even trying to give him a jewel she had bought, saying it shines just like his eyes. At that, Rufus can no longer hold back and pushes Katarina to the bed and admits that he also fell in love with her. But before anything more could happen between them, the maid calls him to tell him that he had an important letter. Upon reading the letter, he realizes that his plans had failed, and all her friends were on their way to rescue her. So the man wakes Katarina in the middle of the night to say goodbye to her and see her one more time. Just at that moment, all her friends arrive along with Lana, who was posing as a maid but actually worked for the Ministry of Magic. While the guards escort Rufus out, he turns to look at Katarina and tells her not to forget the promise they made. After this, everyone is happy to see that the waifu was fine, and the maid can't help but hug her, making the blonde jealous as usual. On the other hand, Ian finds out what Selena had done, and he clears up all the misunderstanding by confessing his love for her again, saying he had been avoiding her because she was too beautiful and a constant temptation for him, as they were not yet married, and for that reason, he stayed away. So he apologized to her, because thanks to that, she had gotten the wrong idea and they managed to reconcile. Once everything is over, the blonde notices the mark Rufus left on Katarina's neck, and she tells him what happened between them the previous night, so the prince thinks that if he keeps waiting, someone else might get ahead. So he stops being so subtle with her and kisses her in front of everyone. The next day, Katarina wakes up thinking that the kiss had been a dream, but it wasn't. And later at school, she meets with her friends and starts to think that being too close to the blonde could be a problem, so the others will be with her as much as they can. Meanwhile, we find out that Lana was actually Susanna, and she was with Jeffrey for mutual benefit. But in reality, their engagement was a sham. She did it to be able to continue with her work without having to give an excuse to a political partner, and the man because he was never interested in his brother's throne. On the contrary, all he cared about were his brothers, and he had an obsessive love for them. So he planned to punish the person who sought to harm them. And on top of that, the waifu tells him that the whole kidnapping was the fault of Marquis Mason. So the man's fury awaited him, because since they were little, he promised to protect them. But over time and all the work they had in nobility, he had drifted away from them, and he thinks he has been a bad brother. On the other hand, we see the blonde talking with Alan about how his brother always worries about him. And there we see a small memory of when he was a child. He always waited for his mother to visit him, and in return, he did all his homework and behaved in the best possible way. However, she never came to visit him, which is why he asked his servants to give him the love that his mother never gave him. But they did not want to do it for fear of disrespecting her. Then, as time passed, his world darkened. But then he met Katarina, and from that moment, everything became more exciting, and he became interested in her thanks to her way of being. At the same time, he also got closer to his brother, talking to him more than usual, and Jeffrey noticed that there he realized how much he cared about his brother. After that, we see that when Alan was a child, he had health problems, but after recovering, others saw him as inferior, and because of that, the man had complexes. Because of that, when his brother Jeffrey sought to help him, the only thing he did was to push him away harshly. And after a while was when he met Katarina, and since she always got along well with everyone, his personality changed. And after that, he went to see his brother regretful and thanked him for always being aware of him. On the other hand, we see that Ian tells his fiancée that the person responsible for helping with Katarina's kidnapping was Jeffrey, leaving her very surprised, as she thought they did not get along very well. But in reality, they used to meet secretly and share their things. After all, he has always been the one who has cared the most about all of them, although sometimes he overdoes it and annoys them. At the same time, Jeffrey is glad that things started to go well after his two brothers got engaged, and while he was telling her all that crying very moved, Susanna was practically asleep, and just when he finishes talking, he goes back to work. But before that, the man asks her a favor as Lana from the Department of Magic, because after the incident of the dark magic, surely more people seek to obtain it. So he tells her to stay alert and inform him of anything. On the other hand, we see Katarina alone talking with the blonde. There, the waifu tells him she thought the whole kiss had been a dream, but the man makes it clear that it was real, and he did it because he liked her. Finally, being aware of the prince's true feelings, the waifu gets very nervous, but then her friends arrive, all jealous, and separate them. As the days go by, Katarina receives an invitation to go to the blonde's house. But after what had happened, she meets with her council and concludes that it is not a good idea, as she didn't want to have any romantic relationship with her fiancé. But she has no choice but to go to not be disrespectful. Upon arriving there, we see that the blonde was jealous as always, thanks to Keith. But then her friends arrived to move past the awkward moment, although they also came with the intention of keeping an eye on the blonde. Tired of everyone crowding her, the waifu decides to go to the forest to get some air. There she finds the tree where she used to have fun as a child, and thinks she doesn't want to get married while talking with the blonde, as the life of a queen was not something she wanted. At that moment, her other friends arrive, and it starts to rain, so they are forced to take shelter in a cabin nearby. There, they all begin to reminisce, and take the opportunity to tell the blonde about when the albino and Katarina met at a party, when they were just little girls. There we see that everyone talked behind their backs because she was the cursed girl of the ass cart, making her feel very bad. However, Katarina, with her cheerful way of being, cheered her up in the middle of the party. There were also all her friends, and taking advantage of everyone being together, the waifu suggests they go explore the forest. But everyone was scared, as they had heard a rumor about a ghost that wandered those places. However, the waifu doesn't give up, and convinces everyone to go and scare off the ghost. But the albino says it's better to talk to him, so he leaves peacefully. In this way, they all go to the forest, and we see Alan very scared all the way, unlike Katarina, who was very calm. And thanks to that, her friends leave their nerves behind and enjoy their adventure. At nightfall, Katarina starts teasing Alan about the ghost, saying it was right behind him, and when he turns around, he almost soils his pants from fright. But in reality, it was the servants who were looking for them. After everyone got scared, and the servants saw that everyone was okay, they let them continue playing, and Katarina suggests that it would be best to split up to continue looking for the ghost. While the waifus walk through the forest, it starts to rain again, and they have to take shelter in the same cabin. There, Sophia tells them that surely all this was her fault, thanks to her supposed curse. But when Katarina tells her she likes the rain, she smiles and feels better. At the same time, Mary, to make her feel better, begins to dance with Katarina some dance steps she had practiced, and seeing that she was better, also tries to do it with her. But there we realize that the waifu is afraid of thunder. That's why Katarina tells her to imagine them as something fun so they don't scare her. And well, there she begins to imagine a story where both fought against a dragon like hunters, and after that, the two end up getting married. Okay. Well, after this crazy story, dawn comes and they meet up with their other friends at the lake, and we see how worried Alan was about them. Or, well, mostly about Katarina. Returning to the present, the blonde asks them if they finally managed to find the supposed ghost, and that's where Katarina tells the truth. It turns out that on the night of the party, everyone was together except her, as her mother had punished her for messing around. When the others went out to the terrace, they saw a very ugly figure, thinking it was the ghost, but it was actually the shadow of Katarina and her mother, thus revealing the identity of the supposed ghost and laughing about the scoldings her mother was giving her. After the rain calmed down, they take the blonde to the lake to integrate her into their memories, and at night, we see Alan complaining to Katarina for not inviting him, while the blonde was thinking of ending the evening with the waifu watching the fireworks. But in the end, he ends up doing it with all his friends. In a scene change, we see Rufus and Raphael working in the magic department, along with Lana, and we see that this waifu is very strict with her employees, as everyone was eager to finish to be able to rest. However, Raphael owed her a lot, as when he wanted to start over, she accepted him into her section and he was very grateful to her, although that didn't solve how tired he was from working late. After a while, we see Katarina and all her friends arrive at the magic department, and meeting again with Rufus, who tells her that from now on she should call him by the name of Sora, and the waifu smiles flirtatiously, making everyone else jealous. Luckily, just at that moment, Lana also appears, introduces herself to all her friends, and invites them to see a new magical artifact, which was a dollhouse. This house works very similar to the Book of Wishes, but instead of fulfilling wishes, it allows each person to be reborn as someone different, or rather as what the person dreamed of being at some point in their life. In the midst of all the conversation, Lana leaves for a moment, and Katarina opens the dollhouse without anyone telling her, activating the magic, and everyone is absorbed into it. Once inside, we see Lana, Raphael, and Sora discover that Alan is reborn as a bird. And there we realize that he always dreamed of something like that, to fly, be free, and always be kissing his beloved sister. On the other hand, Nicole is reborn as a somewhat diabolical black cat, just as he really is. But the only difference is that this time he was closer to Katarina than usual. At the same time, we see that Sophia is reborn as a tiny fairy who liked to sleep with Katarina. And finally, we see that the blonde wanted to leave behind the throne, travel the world like Christopher Columbus, and be free fighting against pirates. On the other hand, we see that Katarina's wish was to spend all day in her room, reading books, playing, and eating as much as possible. And seeing all this, Lana worries, because if they like being like that, they might seek to stay there. But while talking with the boys, they mentioned that the only way to get everyone out was to find a doll that was inside, which they had to put to sleep to be able to get out. Then Raphael and Anne decide to enter to fulfill the mission. After this, we see Katarina going to work in her garden, but when she returns to the house, she doesn't take off her dirty boots and ends up dirtying the floor. Just then, her mother comes by and sees this, so she gives her a lecture for more than 3 hours. Because of this, Katarina goes to complain to her brother, but when she goes to his room, she realizes he hasn't returned all day, which worries everyone in the mansion. The next day, one of the maids wakes Katarina because her mother urgently needed her presence. When she goes to her, her mother hands her a letter from Keith, which says he's going to leave the house for a while because he can no longer stand the obligations of nobility. Reading this, Katarina is shocked, and then her mother explains that the only reason he would do something like this would be because of her, as after talking so much with her to try to give her the best advice, he ended up depressed and wanted to get away because he felt he should no longer take care of her. Upon hearing this, Katarina meets with her council and regrets having done such a thing to her brother, so she prepares to go out to look for him. Just then, the blonde arrives and offers to accompany her. But since they had no idea where to look, they go to Lana for help. There, the waifu gives them a magical teddy bear, which could track Keith if they gave it a clue to follow. She also offers to help because the more people looking, the better. In this way, the waifu returns to the mansion to search her brother's belongings for something the bear could track. There, she finds a chest with things she had given him, so she takes them and returns to the magic department, where she hands them to the waifu. We learn that the bear is called Alexander, and that Lana created it because Prince Jeffrey had ordered it to keep an eye on his brothers. Then, along with Sora, the blonde, Lana, and the blonde, Katarina begins her journey to look for her brother all over the city, asking many places showing a portrait of Keith, but unfortunately, no one seems to have seen him. During the search, Lana takes a break with Katarina, where they eat something and the waifu tries to cheer her up. At the same time, she tells her several personal things, and in the middle of the conversation, she takes the opportunity to hint that everyone is interested in her. But as Katarina is quite oblivious, she understands nothing. On the other hand, we see Keith locked in a dungeon as a mysterious woman appeared in the middle of an alley and kidnapped him. There, his ex-brother along with a witch visit him and start beating him. Later, while Katarina continues with the search, she sees a very beautiful ornament and the blonde offers to buy it. But as he tries to approach her, Sora prevents it, as Mary had asked the magic department to take care of Katarina, or rather, to not let the blonde get too close. Well, at nightfall, the boys rent an inn and have dinner as a family, where we see Katarina very happy despite everything that was happening. However, she misses Keith's presence. As if he had been with them, he would most likely have prevented her from overeating. Thinking about this, the waifu gets depressed, just thinking that she used her brother as a babysitter and goes to sleep in the room with the blonde. Before sleeping, the blonde talks to her and tells her that she was enjoying camping in a village as a family, but at the same time felt bad because she knew it was not the best time for such comments. At the same time, we realize that the teddy bear is quite arrogant and starts making hateful faces at Katarina, so they start getting along poorly. And well, before sleeping, the blonde thanks Katarina for being her friend, as after her magical powers manifested, she had not had much luck making new friends. In a scene change, we see Lana using a magical device that works just like a cell phone. Thus, she communicates with Raphael, who informs her that Katarina's father was investigating, but still had not discovered anything. Then the waifu tells her that the person behind all this has to be someone incredibly amazing, since they managed to mislead the Duke of Klaus. At the same time, the man suggests telling Katarina what they had discovered about her brother's kidnapping, but Lana tells him it's better not to do it until they are sure, as they were only rumors. Returning with Katarina, we see her spending the afternoon with the blonde and the bear, and being in the garden, they discover a seed that sticks to clothes. Here, Alexander starts annoying her, so at night the waifu wants to get revenge, and while he falls asleep, she sticks a bunch of seeds all over him, having a fun time with her friends. But before sleeping, she gets sad again, remembering how much she missed her brother. Speaking of him, we see how he was still in the same cell locked up, where the Dark Witch visits him and tells him he had been kidnapped because his brother Thomas wanted to see him fall, as the fat man had long been envious of him, and the witch, seeing him all happy, wanted to experiment dark magic on him. So she began to use her spells to possess him by breaking his spirit. Here, the man gets scared and begins to regret not having been able to stay with his dear sister, as he no longer had hopes and thought he would never see her again. On the other hand, we see Katarina wake up desperate, and without knowing how, she feels the dark magic being done to her brother. So she leaves the inn very worried to get some air. There she meets the blonde, and she realizes that the bear returned the prank of the seeds. After removing them from her hair, Jordo tells her that he would stop flirting with her, as he knew she was very worried about her brother, and it was not the best time for those things, and hugs her. Then Sora arrives very jealous and separates them, and that's when the blonde realizes it was something personal. Later, everyone goes to the city to continue with the search, but this time they split into groups, and Katarina stays with Sora. There, the man takes the opportunity to hug her and remind her of the promise they had made some time ago. And well, at the end of the day, after searching everywhere, they meet up and the blonde manages to see the Dark Witch. After this, Lana talks to Raphael and discovers that Keith had met his biological mother, as the mysterious woman in the alley was her, and well, since that day he had disappeared. At the same time, the bear discovers the man's location, and the waifu, being sure of everything, goes to tell the others that her brother had indeed been kidnapped, and that the dark mage seen by the blonde was directly related to that. That same night, Katarina has a nightmare about her brother when he was little, where the man was crying in the darkness, but she finds him and promises to save him. The next morning, everyone gathers while watching the mansion where they assume he is imprisoned, as it was heavily guarded by guards. And also the blonde had detected a source of dark magic emanating from the entire place. Even Sora, who is not a light mage like her, also perceives it. Katarina wants to enter at once, but Lana stops her and tells her that it is best to ask for reinforcements from the magic department. But they could arrive the next day, and the waifu could not wait that long. So she asks her friends to enter at once to rescue Keith. And as everyone knew her and knew that she would not stop, they accompany her. Then the blonde tells her to prepare for after the rescue. At that moment, the group advances toward the mansion's back door. The blonde girl is terrified, but since Katarina is with her, she manages to calm down a little. Thanks to Sora's strategies, they successfully infiltrate the mansion, while the Dark Witch watches them from afar. Once inside, they defeat all the guards in their path. After Sora interrogates them, they realize that none of them know anything about Keith's kidnapping. So they continue searching until they find the fat man lying in a room. When they ask him about Keith, he reacts angrily, saying that Keith was supposed to be the heir of his family but was expelled. Seeing Keith doing better than him made him hate him. Since then, he encountered the Dark Witch, and no matter how much she tortured Keith, he never broke. The fat man, after telling his sad story, ends up even more pathetic than he already was, and then faints. The group continues searching the mansion until they find the secret room where Keith was being held. However, they seem to have arrived too late. He's almost entirely consumed by dark magic. The others go to seek help to break the spell, while Katarina and the blonde guy stay behind, trying to wake him up. Meanwhile, Keith is trapped in a childhood dream, slowly being consumed by darkness. In the real world, Katarina is crying desperately, wanting to save him and also swearing revenge against whoever was responsible. She wishes to throw them into a pit of black snakes. Speaking of snakes, the ornament the blonde guy had bought for her suddenly begins to glow, making the dark magic's bindings take a tangible form. Snakes. Without hesitation, Katarina frantically starts pulling them off, while the blonde guy just stares at her like an idiot instead of helping. But oh well. As Katarina removes the bindings, Keith begins to wake up in his dream. He sees a kind of light calling out to him just as he's about to give up. Upon hearing Katarina's voice, the darkness starts transforming into his happiest memories with her. He realizes that he is no longer an unwanted child and that many people care about him, including Katarina. Fully aware of this, he finally wakes up and, without realizing it, kisses Katarina. Afterward, one of the dark bindings she removed forms a sort of puddle from which a small dark puppy emerges. The dark witch then appears, asking Katarina how she managed to transform it, since her goal was to create a familiar using darkness. But somehow, Katarina succeeded without even knowing how. Before they can catch her, the witch disappears. Back at the mansion, Katarina adopts the puppy and names it Pochi. Later, when Keith wakes up, she visits him excitedly. She tells him what happened while he was supposedly unconscious, but Keith admits that he wasn't actually asleep or dreaming. Seizing the moment, he confesses his feelings to her once and for all. However, right then, all of Katarina's other admirers arrive. And, as always, the blonde guy picks a fight with Keith, especially since Keith had kissed Katarina in the carriage on the way back, claiming it was to clean the lips of his precious wife. Meanwhile, Susanna meets with Jeffrey to inform him about Katarina's kidnapping and to share new discoveries about the Dika family. Not only were they using dark magic, but they also had many girls practicing it, one of them being the dark witch, Sarah, who was responsible for Keith's abduction. She also explains how Katarina managed to reverse the dark magic spell and shows him the ornament she used to create Pochi. This gives Susanna even more reasons to bring Katarina to the magic department. And, after hearing everything, Jeffrey becomes very interested in Katarina as well. 2 years later, the blonde guy is giving a speech to the graduates of the magic department, among them a very excited Katarina. After the speech, she gathers with her friends to celebrate and thank them for spending all that time together. At that moment, Ginger and Frey approach her with gifts. When Katarina notices that Ginger doesn't have a dress for the party that night, she offers to lend her one. Seeing this, the other two girls get jealous and also ask for dresses. Later, Katarina says goodbye to her parents and leaves for the party in a carriage with Keith and Ginger. Keith comments that the other girls will be jealous when they find out she traveled with him. But, as usual, Katarina has no idea what he's talking about. She also mentions that she packed some clothes since the student council planned to have a sleepover at the castle after the party. Once at the event, Katarina speaks with Ian, Jeffrey, and their wives, who congratulate her on graduating, especially Susanna. Selena takes the opportunity to thank Katarina once again for helping her with her engagement, but Katarina never gets a moment of peace, as the blonde guy arrives and tells them to leave her alone so he can dance with her. He starts flirting, but since this seemed like a war for Katarina, Keith steps in mid-dance to separate them. He reminds the prince that he should be attending to the guests and continues dancing with Katarina himself, warning her to be cautious of all the things the blonde guy might try. After that, Nicole approaches and asks to dance the next piece with her. This causes all the girls who are obsessed with him to faint on the spot. Speaking of girls, Nicole tells Katarina that all his dates have been failures. She wonders aloud why that would happen since he's so popular and handsome. Nicole replies that he wasn't ready for married life and is still waiting to find the right girl. Hearing this, Katarina gets nervous and goes to grab some food. There, she runs into Alan, who teases her for eating so desperately, as if she didn't care about the party at all. Katarina simply replies that the food is delicious and even feeds him a bite. Seeing this, Mary and the albino girl also want her to feed them like babies. As night falls, Katarina visits Keith's room to show him the pajamas she plans to wear. However, Keith tells her that he sent all the maids away and that they are alone in the room. Completely oblivious as always, Katarina doesn't realize the situation she's in. Keith then pushes her onto the bed and reminds her of his feelings for her. Apparently, she had forgotten or thought he was joking. He also wants to teach her a lesson. This is what could happen if a girl enters a man's room in her pajamas while being so innocent. But being the good brother he is, he lets her go, for now. Later, after Katarina recovers from her state of shock thanks to her brother, she talks with her friends about what kind of people they like. All of them describe Katarina, except for the albino girl, who prefers books. That night, she dreams of Achan and sees her playing a second part of Fortune Lover, where Maria is in the magic department, meets 2 new members, and Katarina is once again the villain, causing her to wake up terrified from that nightmare. The next day, her friends help her in her garden, and Katarina is visibly happy to be spending time with them. After that, she goes with the blonde girl to the magic department, where they meet Cyrus and Percy, the 2 guys Katarina had dreamed about, making her panic, as it seems her troubles have returned. In a scene change, we travel to the past and see the blonde guy as a child. We learn about everything he had to go through while his brother Alan was sick. Despite carrying that worry, he excelled at everything he did. However, over time, his life lost its color, until he met Katarina. At first, he thought she was selfish and quite strange, but after a rather dumb accident she had, he decided to use her as an excuse to avoid getting engaged. However, when he visited her to check on her, he realized she wasn't as selfish as he initially thought, and he began to fall in love with her. So he proposed marriage. As he got to know her better, he became a better person, which made him certain that she was the right waifu for him. On the other hand, we see a glimpse of Keith's past. His mother treated him poorly because he was an illegitimate child, yet she still raised him. One day, he couldn't take it anymore and unleashed his magic against his siblings. That's when people started calling him a monster. Afterward, the Claus family adopted him. That's where he met his sister, and at first, he also thought she was strange. However, she was the only person who had ever treated him kindly, so he quickly grew attached to her. Although his new parents initially had issues because of him, things eventually settled. However, due to those problems, he became frustrated and, without meaning to, used his magic against his sister, hurting her. Overwhelmed with guilt, he locked himself in a room, believing he truly was a monster. But then, Katarina saved him and changed his perspective. From that moment on, he wanted to stay by her side to protect her. Meanwhile, we see Mary being tormented by her sisters after their mother's death, which caused her to lose confidence in herself. That changed the day she met Katarina. Thanks to her, Mary regained her confidence and quickly formed a strong friendship with her. The next person Katarina helped was Alan. After recovering from his illness, he tried to reintegrate into society. However, since the blonde guy had more experience in everything and was better than him, Alan developed an inferiority complex. That's when he met Katarina through Mary and started competing with her for his fiancé's love. However, as they spent more time together, he became friends with Katarina. Thanks to her advice on how to stop feeling inferior to Jordo, and after making him laugh like never before, Alan finally let go of his worries. Then we see that Sophia never had good relationships with others due to her appearance, so she found refuge in books and in the Emerald Princess. Speaking of the princess, one day, when Sophia was being bullied by some girls, Katarina saved her. When Sophia thanked her, she discovered that Katarina also liked the Emerald Princess. From that day on, they started spending time together and became friends. Finally, we see that Nicole frequently interacted with the princes because Katarina was his sister's friend. At first, he worried that Katarina might be a bad influence on his sister, but the blonde guy assured him otherwise. Meanwhile, people continued to bully his sister, but he always stood by her side, which led him to develop a colder personality. However, Katarina once told him how lucky he was to have his family. That moment made him realize she understood his feelings, so he started visiting the Claus mansion more often to see Katarina. If you've reached this part of the video, comment the word Villainess in the comments. Remember to subscribe so you don't miss the next part of this anime.